Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to Mr. Carlos Ghosn for being with us online from Beirut. Mr. Ghosn, thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And thank you particularly to dedicate some time for us in this very difficult geopolitical context. We were supposed to meet face to face. We tried several times. The conditions are not right, so we're doing this by video. Hopefully, we'll have an occasion to do like a sequel of this discussion face to face somewhere in Beirut, hopefully. So, Mr. Ghosn, I would like to basically structure this discussion along two main lines. First of all, I would like to go back with you on the economic war between Renault and Nissan, because I do believe that whatever legal case has been built against you and that started at the end of 2018 in Japan is part of a much wider economic war between Nissan and Renault. And I do believe that this is what we should be focusing on. I mean, I have looked a lot at some of the interviews you've given previously to various media. You've covered the legal aspect of the case that was brought against you. And what I would like to do today is really focus on the economic war. And then in the second part, I think it would be interesting to de-zoom from the case of Renault and Nissan and to look at the entire automobile industry. And I would like to ask you a couple of questions on how you see the future of the automobile industry with new players coming online, especially from China, and causing a lot of worries throughout Europe, throughout Japan, and also in the US. And so the idea would be really for you to share with us your views on what the future of the automobile industry will be. I would like to start with a first question. It's actually a mix of several questions I'm going to put together. Behind the legal case that was built against you and that started with your arrest in Japan at the end of 2018, there is definitely a case of economic warfare over the control of a strategic asset. I teach the Renault-Nissan war in several business schools in France and in universities. And this is what I believe everybody should be focusing on, how a state actor and a private company is fighting for control of a strategic asset. I would like to remind listeners that Nissan, at the time of your arrest, was the second largest car maker in the third largest economy in the world. And you made it part of the largest car alliance in the world, the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi Alliance. Evidently, the idea here was for Japan to try to regain control over the strategic asset that is Nissan. We have to remind the capital structure. At the time of your legal troubles in Japan, Renault was owning 43% of the capital of Nissan with voting rights. Nissan, in return, had 15% with no voting rights. And the French state had 15% shares into Renault with double voting rights in virtue of the Florange law. So my first question for you would be, I know that in some interviews you've confirmed that there is indeed behind the legal case against you, there is a case of economic warfare. Did you at any point anticipate a possible rebellion on the part of Nissan and on the part of the Japanese side? Is it something that you believe could have been anticipated and possibly prevented?
Could this have been prevented? Yes, without any doubt. Could you have foreseen what was going to happen? I don't think so, because what ended up happening is a lose-lose situation. Nobody really wins except the people who are control freaks, which mean they want to control a company independently of how powerful this company is or how successful the company is. The start of the story, obviously this alliance has been signed since 1999, and there was always between 1999 and 2018 frictions between the French and the Japanese. Frictions due to the fact that these two countries are, as you know, very nationalistic, independently of the appearance. There are extremely proud cultures. There are cultures with a very heavy tradition of state presence and state control. Okay, I mean, The Japanese do it their own way. The French have their own way. Obviously, we can talk a lot about it. But these frictions, I've witnessed them for the 19 years I was head of the alliance. But I was able to maneuver around these frictions by bringing some common sense to the different parties. But the real detonator was the unfortunate voting of the Florence law. This was, and as you know, this happened in 2015, 2016. At that moment, Emmanuel Macron was the Minister of Economy in France. And they voted this law, which frankly, for me, was a horrible law, because you give a double voting rights to people who hold their share for more than 2 years, which obviously is to the advantage of governments, because governments usually don't trade shares, and in a certain way, big families. That means the big family who are shareholder of their own company, and all of a sudden they have a undue advantage over the other shareholders because they are holding their share for a very long time. In fact, they are minimizing the shares of the people who move in and out, etc., etc. So the Florence law by itself, when it was in the cooking, I opposed it. I said, look, this is not part of my belief. I'm a more liberal person in terms of the economy, and I said it very clearly. But even the Florence law has an element in it, which was that if 2/3 of the shareholders of a company reject the application of the Florence law, it would not be implemented in this particular company. So I have alerted at that time the Minister of Economy, telling him that I was against this law, that this law was against all my principles, and I will make a campaign with our shareholders to vote against the implementation of the law. We've made the campaign. The polls I had between the shareholders, that we had more than 75% of the shareholders supporting me. The people who were not supporting me were obviously the French state with 15% of the shares, and some of the financial institutions which are under the guidance of the French state. But practically all the other shareholders were against the implementation of the law. So when, and obviously these polls, these internal polls were known by the French state, because they have representative in our board, in the Renault board. And what they have done, which is absolutely unbelievable, is at the moment where France was fighting to reduce their deficit to less than 3%, they borrowed money from Deutsche Bank, bought shares inside Renault, went up into the capital of Renault, just to avoid us to have more than 2/3 of the vote, which ended up happening. We had the majority of the vote. We didn't have the 2/3 of the votes, and we were defeated. But we were defeated in a way which was not so loyal, because it was some kind, you put a law, and then at the first opportunity, you tweak the law. You turn it upside down. All of this happened with discussion in the board of Renault. And you know, in the board of Renault, you had not only representative of the French state, but you have also 2 representatives of Nissan who were Japanese. And you know how the system works in Japan. That means the executives of Nissan have a lot of meetings with the métis. They tell the métis what's going on inside the company. I've been followed, as you can imagine, as a foreigner heading one of the largest companies in Japan. Everything I was doing inside the company was reported by the métis. I knew that. I knew, but frankly, I had nothing to hide. Which means that when the Japanese state was aware about the maneuvering of the French state, this is where trust was in a certain way broken. Okay, this was in 2016. But at the same time, as my role was to defend the balance inside the alliance, Japanese knew that. They didn't act immediately in 2016. This happened in 2018. I remind you that my mandate at the head of Renault was to be renewed in June 2018. I was renewed with the French government saying that that would support my renewal because my mission was to make this alliance irreversible, which was interpreted by the French as we go for a merger, even though I always spoke against the merger because my management beliefs were that you can't merge two companies with based one in Japan and the other one in France. The only you can make them work together in a harmonious way, developing synergy, and that's it. But I agreed to make the alliance irreversible, but without a merger. Obviously, the Japanese did not buy into it. They probably thought that my renewal at the head of Renault was mainly to start with the first step where the alliance would become irreversible, and maybe a second step with or without me is to make the merger, because you make the alliance irreversible, then you cannot fight the merger. And this is where probably the decision was made between the Métis from one side. I remind you that in 2018, the head of the Métis was a very known, very nationalistic Japanese politician that unraveled the alliance because it could not happen in a legal way, in a board coup, was to get rid of me. And we knew after that there were many scenarios, scenario of an accident. Fortunately for me, it didn't happen. Scenario where they would accuse me of being a little bit crazy. And the third one was the legal system. The legal system. And they ended up opting for the legal system. I just remind you as a last point that the reason for which I was arrested in 2018 was that I did not declare a retirement package which was neither accepted by the board, nor voted by the board, nor even paid, which was frankly a ludicrous accusation. Even for the Japanese, nobody understood. They thought that I had a tax evasion, I had other problems, but the only reason. And then they kept me, as you know, in prison for as much time as necessary to go and dig into many, many different activities I had or relationship I have to try to bring additional charges. And frankly, during my interrogation in Japan, they said it to me. The prosecutor told me very quickly, look, if you don't confess the fact that you've done something wrong, we're going to go look for something else. We're going to involve your family. We're going to look about your relationship. That the were obvious and they were recorded. And they brought all the stuff that 6 weeks after, and then 2 months after, adding to the charge, sending all these charges to the French prosecutor to calm down France about what was going on, and the rest of the story, you know it. So, the obviously all of this was political. The French government wanted to, in a certain way, take control of the alliance because it was becoming a very big actor. The Japanese did not want the French government to take control of the alliance. They wanted to keep control, at least on the Japanese side of the alliance, between Nissan and Mitsubishi. And you know the end of the story. The Japanese made a move. The French government caved. And 6 years later, because in 2024, Nissan is in trouble. It is a shadow of what it used to be. Renault may not be in trouble, but it's much smaller and much more continental than it was. We are obviously far from being the leader in the car industry, not only in terms of size or profit, but even in terms of technology. And you know the story. You know, when you want to understand what happens, what people say is not important as much as what you see happening. And when you see happening, you understand the whole story. Everything unfolded in a way where the Japanese didn't care about the health or the development of Nissan and Mitsubishi. They just want to have a Japanese control on Nissan and Mitsubishi. And the French did not accept the fact that Renault, having saved Nissan in 1999, they would not have a bigger say or even the control say on the lines. The last element I would add is, probably you know, but the Elysee knew that moment, that I was negotiating in 2018 a deal with John Elkann, who was the chairman of Fiat Chrysler, for Fiat Chrysler to join the alliance. We had many meetings in Paris, and we were supposed to sign an MOU in January 2019, which would have brought Fiat Chrysler to Renault-Nissan, making it, Renault-Nissan Mitsubishi, making it by far the largest auto alliance in the world. But it obviously did not happen after my arrest. And also the Japanese, when obviously I told them that we were negotiating with the Fiat Chrysler, seen even another threat that Nissan and Mitsubishi would be diluted into a group where the European would be the majority holders. That's what I can tell you about it. The story is clear. It's a little bit complicated, like all the plots, but there was an economic war. I wouldn't say even an economic war, because everybody lost into this war.
Mm-hmm.
It was more a kind of control war between two cultures who consider that a smaller company, a weaker company under their control is better than a stronger company, a healthier company with very little control on them.
Thank you very much for this explanation. And I think it's quite important that you made that connection between the different timing and the role of the French government. And we will go back to the question of FCA right after. I think there's two things that I would like to ask you about, and that probably goes through your entire almost 20 years in Japan. You very rightly pointed out the role, the responsibility, maybe the inspiration given by METI, the Japanese Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, which is the all-powerful ministry in Japan. And as you rightly reminded us, in 2018, METI was under the control of Minister Hiroshige Seko, which is a very staunchly nationalistic politician, even more so than some of the other ministers that were around. I would like to ask, over the 20 years that you were deeply involved in corporate Japan, did you always feel this nationalistic view of corporate Japan, or did you notice that this is something that was kind of creeping up more recently?
Yeah, no, I frankly, when I arrived in Japan, the first year I was in Japan, if you remember, there have been many prime ministers and many changes, but the most important figure was Koizumi-san, and Koizumi was an open prime minister. He was more liberal. He wanted, in fact, he even used me to in his council of advisors to bring foreign investment to Japan. So the first years, I would say between 1999 and up to 2008, up to the financial crisis, were great years because I had the support of the government. They knew what I was doing. They agreed with it. They used me as an ambassador for investment in Japan, and everything was going well. Things were started to change after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And then when Abe-san came to power, and you know, he's a more nationalistic kind of minister, but you know, in the nationalistic minister, you have different grades.
Yes.
You have most extreme to the most reasonable. Unfortunately for me, after 2016, very extremist nationalistic were controlling the Japanese government, and particularly the METI, but not only the METI, also you had the Secretary General of the government who followed Abe as a prime minister. Didn't last long. He lasted 1 year.
Yoshihide Suga.
A very nationalistic figure. And these people were very sensitive to the fact that the French government was maneuvering to try to take Nissan and Mitsubishi out of the normal life of a Japanese company, and it was unacceptable for them. On top of this, in this kind of situation, you have a lot of politicking inside the company, people thinking that they can ride this wave and maybe get to be promoted or to take control of the company independently of competence, independently of performance, independently of capacity of development or other things. And that's what ended up happening. It's sad for me to see that this company, which was practically bankrupt in 1999, came back to the forefront of the industry and was flourishing, growing, very profitable, at the center of an alliance which became a leader in the industry, now is in a situation to beg for a collaboration with Honda. If you follow the latest news, yes, will probably fall under the influence of Honda and with it Mitsubishi. But yes, I felt this nationalistic tendency creeping up since 2010, 2011, after the financial crisis. But the summum was reached in 2016, unfortunately, at a moment where French politicians were playing with the alliance by trying to take control independently of the hostility of the Japanese. Frankly, I don't think they believe seriously that there would be a risk coming from Japan. I don't know why, even though I have alerted them many times that trust is being broken and an alliance cannot work without trust, that this trust I put probably 18 or 19 years of my professional life to build between the French and the Japanese and even other players in the industry. But, French politicians can be from time to time arrogant. They just think that they're right and that they don't care about the experience or the knowledge of somebody who's on the ground following what's going on. And the result, it's a real disaster. It's an industrial disaster for France. It's an industrial disaster for Renault and Nissan. And obviously, I'm paying a very high price for this.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back a little bit to the role of the French government, because to me, it's like when I was researching this case, this was the biggest point, I would say, of astonishment. I mean, I'm French just like you, so I am used of the arrogance of some French leaders, especially political leaders. But the level of blindness, the level of short-termism that I understood from this case, and you seem to be confirming this, I would even say that the passiveness of the French government is probably what is the most striking at first. Throughout the entire time when you were arrested, in prison, or under house arrest, we've all been wondering, what is the French government doing? I mean, this is whether they have a personal issue with the man. This is the CEO of a French-led alliance. But I would even go as far as saying that when we get past the passiveness, it even looks like the French government at many times actually actively weakened the position of Renault. And I would like to know if you manage yourself to understand what could be the reason, because it sounds very much suicidal to me.
Yeah, well, usually politicians are not so accountable for what they're doing, and they're used to that. That means who is accountable for the disaster of the Renault-Nissan alliance from the French side? Nobody even talk about it. So they're used to that. They said, okay, we're going to try something. If it doesn't work, bad luck. Bad luck for all the people involved. But they've not been hurt in a certain way politically, but what they have done. That means the hypocrisy of the French government and the cowardness of the French government in this case is unspeakable. That means I had, and you know that probably I've said it many times, the only politicians who really came to see me in Japan while I was still in Japan was Nicolas Sarkozy. And Nicolas Sarkozy told me clearly, if he was president, he would have sent Fillon, his prime minister, to the Haneda airport, and he would not have left without me in the plane. And if the Japanese have something against me, well, they transmit this accusation to the French government, and the French government will decide about my fate. This is not what happened. What happened is immediately after I have arrested, there have been 2 or 3 weeks of hesitation in a certain way. And then when the French felt that the Japanese would not abandon my case, they just, in a certain way, accepted the fact that I was eliminated in the hope that the alliance would survive, in the hope that the Japanese would not go up to breaking this alliance, which, by the way, they led the French to think that, yeah, that there may be a compromise around there. But, and you've seen this ridiculous photo of Ménard, not Ménard, Sénard, hands with Ushida-san and with Bolloré and etc. This is a new alliance, this is a new departure, etc. But 3 years later, you know exactly what happened. That means Renault had to sell their shares in Nissan. They're not working anymore together. Nissan is looking at strengthening itself with Honda, and Renault it's on its own. They came back to what they were before 1999. Renault as a continental, European continental company, small company, and Nissan back to trouble, looking for outside help. It's a pity to see that. Who paid the price for it? Nobody. Who was accountable for these mistakes? Nobody. And frankly, the summum was that Bruno Le Maire, at a certain point in time, I think it was in February 2009,
Minister of the Economy,
made this horrific statement that we trust the Japanese legal system. We trust the Japanese legal system, even though they know very well how the Japanese system works, the hostage justice system, that they've been criticizing in the case of, you know, the mixed couples where the husband take the kids, go to Japan, and the French cannot even see, or the other way around. And we have many, many cases, like, I don't know if you've seen recently the case of Iwao Hadamata, who has been in prison for probably 50 years and then declared innocent. And the most striking thing that in 2014, the judge accepted the appeal. It takes 10 years to decide on the appeal of a case which obviously was fabricated against him. This is the way the Japanese system works. And having a French official saying we trust the Japanese system, while they obviously know about how distorted it is, how unfair it is, how inhuman it is, just made me sick. And that's why I think all these people, eventually the president is responsible for it, Bruno Le Maire, Alexis Keller, who is the chief of staff, who, by the way, was at a certain point in time a board member of Renault as a representative of the APE. All these people carry a huge responsibility into what happened passively, and the Japanese made the crime. That means they just dug the grave, and the other one helped them cover the skeleton. But this is an unfortunate case, but it happens. You know, this is not the only case where the French government, in a certain way, prefer control on development, prefers its own influence on the performance of the company. And the Japanese, you know, they're not better than that. They must be today. They are horrified by the situation of Nissan, and having a Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi kind of conglomerate is a very weak response to the difficult situation that Nissan and Mitsubishi are in today.
Thank you. I think this is the right transition for the second part of this discussion, which is the future of the automobile industry. You're basically telling us that both Renault and Nissan, as a result of this war, are basically back to square one, back
Yeah.
to where they were like when you took over about 20 years ago. You were brought in, if I remember correctly, from Michelin initially by Louis Schweitzer into Renault to basically drive this consolidation. Do you see, and we've continued to see a lot of consolidation. You very rightly mentioned the fact that Fiat Chrysler FCA at one point was interested in basically joining the Renault-Nissan Mitsubishi alliance, and that you had worked on making it possible. The French government again made it impossible, so FCA went to Peugeot, Citroën to create Stellantis. We've seen this consolidation trend continuing. Do you believe that today, end of 2024, consolidation is still the name of the game? Or are we going to start now looking at individual car manufacturers basically dying out individually if they are not big enough?
No, I think consolidation will continue to take place, but you should also take in consideration the fact that today you have new actors compared to the years 2000. You have a 1,000-pound gorilla coming into the field, and it's China. My first visit to China was probably in 2001 when I was starting to negotiate the taking over of Dongfeng in China. China was not a big player in the industry. I think they had a very, very weak car manufacturer. They were looking for technology. They were looking for learning the job because they considered that the auto industry is a very strategic area of activity that they need to develop. And they've done it well. First, they forced the foreign car makers to make joint venture 50-50. You could not have more than 50% if you want to establish yourself in China. And then little by little, they asked also for a transfer of technology. And they are consolidating their own industry because I think there were about 300 small car makers in China. Now, they're probably 2/3, at least, of them have disappeared. There are still too much, and that will continue to consolidate. And you have the emergence of some big players that, in my opinion, will play a very important role in the global auto industry, like BYD or other company, Geely, Great Wall, and you have many names like this. So consolidation will continue. I don't think companies will disappear. I think when they weaken, they will be gobbled by other company who can use them, use the name, use the brand, use some of the technology to their own benefit. So without any doubt, this industry will continue to consolidate, but with new players coming. Particularly the new players are mainly today or Chinese or electric car players. These are the two main, I would say, entities that are changing a little bit the face of this industry, which means the classical players continue to play the game like it was played 20 years ago. I think they're going to be in trouble. It's going to take some time because they are very big organizations. But you will have to count with the Chinese who are playing already a growing role in the industry, and this will continue. And this will continue.
Do you think that Renault's future could be to be gobbled by one of those actors?
I think Renault, as it is today, is not viable. That means they can be what they were before 1999, a small European company doing some profit, limited in its global ambitions, but they will not resist the mammoth that are developing and the ambitions of many companies who have much bigger strategy visions about the industry. Nissan since 2018 has been in trouble. They never came out of this trouble. I remember when I left in 2018, I left with a cash pot of more than $20 billion. It's gone. The whole thing is gone. And one of the reasons for which they are looking for an alliance with Honda is because can't anymore have the resources to develop the technology. They have to bring somebody else, so they share the cost of the development of the technology. Nissan was a leader in electric car. Well, they are today trailing not only their Japanese counterparts who didn't believe in electric cars at the beginning. When I started with electric car, everybody said, no, it's hybrid. And then Toyota went to hydrogen. Now they are in front of Nissan on electric car, which is absolutely unbelievable. So what I'm saying is a lot of changes will happen. Most of the change will be carried by the Chinese and by the electric car makers like Tesla or the like of Tesla. These are going to be the main agent of change into the industry. The industry will continue to grow. You know, mobility is a very important factor in the modern life. Not only the mobility of people, but also the mobility of goods. The last mile delivery and the development of the fact that people are ordering their goods now. They're not go shopping for these goods, or they go to the website and then delivery. Then this mobility is changing a lot, which requires a lot of new technology. First, obviously, the electric car, which is obvious, but even the autonomous cars, that means the cars that don't need a driver or can be driven from a distance. All these technology are going to change the face of this industry. So I think this industry is going to continue to evolve, and they're going to be new winners and a lot of losers.
On the Chinese actors, let me quote two car manufacturer CEOs who spoke very clearly about how they see Chinese competition. Ola Källenius, CEO of Mercedes-Benz, I think a couple of weeks ago, talking about Chinese competition, especially in the electric vehicle segment. He says, I'm quoting, "It's a Darwinistic-like price war, market purification. And many of those players that are around now, many of those are not going to be around 5 years from now." And the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, I think it was around end of last year, he called the Chinese auto industry an existential threat. So my question to you would be, it looks like governments in Europe and the US are taking the protectionist route to try to tackle this competition. You've read that in the US, now the Ministry of Commerce is talking about banning all China-made navigation systems in connected cars. In Europe, we've had the European Union recently voting not with a consensus, but with a fairly large majority voting for an increase in tariffs on Chinese cars. Germany voted against. What do you think is missing from European, American, and Japanese car makers that they cannot compete against Chinese car makers without resorting to protectionism? Is it lack of investment in innovation? Are we talking about a lack of conducive regulatory environment? Is it a lack of domestic market momentum? Is it a problem of supply chain resilience? How do you explain that?
Well, first, I think the Chinese, it is an industrial force. We have to do with it. I mean, you're not fighting against people who are just dumping products and doing all these tricks. It is an industrial force. And I've seen it personally, because when we have installed our first plants in China, Nissan plants in China, we used to have worldwide in the alliance about 55 assembly plants. I mean, big assembly plants. And 3 of them were in China. And every 3 months, we had a classification of these plants in terms of performance. Performance based on productivity of the plant, performance based also on quality of the product coming out of the plant, and performance based on speed, the speed of making changes, adapting to new products, etc. And what struck me is that the 3 Chinese plants of Nissan were topping all the Japanese plants. Okay, so Obviously, this was with Japanese technology, with Japanese investment, etc. But at the end of the day, I came to the conclusion: China is not. It's not fake. There is an industrial power. There is an industrial inventiveness. There is an industrial eagerness to play at the level of the size and the importance of the country. So yes, they are supported by their government. Yes, it's true. Yes, the laws in China are here not to protect the Chinese from competition, but to allow the Chinese car maker to grow until they can compete on even ground. And it's not a coincidence that the Chinese have taken the electric cars and taken the lead in electric cars, because obviously in the industry they could not compete on combustion engine with the Germans or the American or the French, who have a century of advance on them. They said, okay, we're going to compete with the new technology that, by the way, did not yet convince most of these players. So they went to electric cars. They put all their chips. They made a lot of investments. They put all the rules in China in order to favor the appetite of the consumer for electric cars. And they became the biggest producer and the biggest consumers of electric cars. That's the way that they play. So coming back to your question, I think protectionist measures are temporary. They are valid only to allow somebody who has been unbalanced or shocked by something sudden happened to him to regain confidence, but it cannot be an ongoing protection. If you put tariffs on products, fine. If it's 1-2 years to give you some time to be more competitive, to be more innovative, it's fine. But if you maintain it for 5 or 10 years, you're going to weaken your industry. That's what you're going to do, because it's much more comfortable. Life would be so easier without competition. Okay, but that's not the name of the game. The name is, okay, protectionist measure can help you for a while to reestablish your balance, give you a little bit of breathing room, but then you have to compete, and competition is coming from China. So when the two CEOs that I know very well are saying this is an existential threat, it's true. But it would be even a worse threat if you don't take it seriously and you think that protectionist measures are going to save you from being competitive or are going to save you from doing the necessary efforts and sacrifice to compete against the Chinese products.
Let's talk about the future now, and it will be my last question. Future versus legacy. I have a couple of numbers. I hope you don't find this too tedious if I read some of them, but I think they do speak volume about this dichotomy between future players and legacy players. For 4 car manufacturers, I'm going to compare number of cars sold every year. So we're talking here about production capacity, the revenue in the 12 months to June 2024, and market capitalization. Volkswagen, about 10 million cars, and do correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, about 10 million cars, Volkswagen, $350 billion in revenue over the past 12 months, which makes Volkswagen number 1 in the world in revenue, and about 53 billion in market capitalization. Stellantis, 13 million cars, 192 billion in revenue, and 50 billion market cap. Renault, 2.5 million cars, approximately today, 58 billion in revenue, number 15 in the world, 12 billion market cap. And sit down for this one, Tesla, 2.5 million cars, same as Renault, approximately, 95 billion in revenue, with only 4 cars. Tesla sells only 4 cars, Model S, Model 3, Model X, Model Y, and market capitalization of $700 billion. So my question to you is the market pricing the future over actual sales? Is the market pricing connectivity promises over current revenue? And are we seeing legacy players dying out gradually because they're failing to sell a future to markets?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Renault at 2.5 million cars. Renault in 2018 sold 4 million. 4 million. They are down to 2.5 million. So this is the sad situation of this company. Now they're bragging about the fact that they are profitable, but their profit today is only a fraction of what it used to be between 2013 and 2018. Anyway, now back to your question. I think Tesla is not being quoted as a car company. Tesla is being quoted as a tech company. And Elon Musk, in a very smart way, has always presented it as a tech company operating in cars. That's the way it's presented. And that's why, for example, some of the innovation he's bringing to the market, like robotization, connectivity, autonomous cars, etc., they are blended in Tesla. And at the same time, he's not going to do only cars in Tesla. He's going to do many other products, which are the fruit of the technology. So the smart thing he has done is he's not somebody who is here to push the metal, as most of the car manufacturers are doing. He's here to innovate, to bring all the potential and the development of the technology to the mobility, and that's what is in their price. All the others are being priced like a commodity. You know, cars are seen like a kind of commodity. If one or two car manufacturers disappear, nothing happened. If Tesla disappear, people have the impression that there is no rival to Tesla, because they're seen more as a tech company operating in car versus a car company trying to maneuver. But also, you know very well that consumer, they not only sell cars, they sell a brand. They buy a brand, and when they buy a brand, they buy a story. They buy a story. Elon Musk is a story by himself. Okay, so when you buy a Tesla, you think you're part of the story of Musk. Okay, so you're proud of it. You have people who, even with the quality problems they have, even with a lot of things, with the pricing they have, they continue that they are unconditional, or a lot of them are unconditional to Tesla. When I brought back Nissan to life in 2000, 2001, I was out all the time. People were buying the story. They were buying a story on top of buying a brand. So if a car maker is just saying, okay, I'm going to offer you the car with this power at this price, etc., he has done 50% of the job, no more than that. The other 50% is you have to sell a story, an interesting story, a futuristic story, something, or you have to have a hero that people can identify to. And in my opinion, this is being completely neglected by the other car maker. There is also another element that plays here, and that's why I think, frankly, the French have no chance, not only against the newcomers, but also against the old players. Because in France, people, they don't like stories, or they like negative stories. You know what I mean? Every time a CEO start to rise, they try to criticize him. They accuse him of a lot of things, and this is totally incompatible with fabricating a strong brand and fabricating a conqueror into the industry. I think a story like Elon Musk's story would have never happened in France. That would probably have put him already in jail for any excess. So that's what I think today is happening. Tesla is a tech company. That's why it's priced 700 billion compared to all the others. And the others have a problem. It's because they think because they have the best car, they're going to be dominant. It's not true. You need to have the best car, but you need to have a story. You need to tell the story. You need to make people proud of buying into your brand or being part of the story, the pleasant story that you're telling the world.
Thank you very much for these views on future. And I think you're right. Tesla, when you buy a Tesla, you're buying a car from the guy who wants to colonize Mars.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very important.
Or buy to put chip in your brain to make you smarter.
Yep.
That's what you're buying, and the guy who's going to tell you the next generation of Tesla are going to be autonomous, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have that, etc. That's you're excited. You're excited, and it's a kind of statement you make. I'm a modern person. I'm an innovative person. I'm a person. I'm not going to buy a boring old brand that didn't know how to renew its image.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghosn, for your time and for sharing these views. I hope we're going to be able to meet face-to-face when the geopolitical environment becomes more conducive. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.